Welcome back, guys, and I'm actually really excited to share this one with you. This is actually my first integration project when I started this hobby. And it really is just what it appears to be. It's a Rapid Strike at its base with the Firefly stock, rough cut, and just a little bit of a Vulcan up front. Now this was, almost 3 years ago. This was back when epoxy putty was the gold standard, and that's just what everybody used, and it was great. And it was actually like the last few stages, like the last week or two of this project, that I actually discovered the DevCon thing. And at that point it was too far. I didn't want to redo everything because I'd already redone this once. So when this project started, I was still pretty fresh in the hobby, and I really took a liking to these integrations. And there's just the idea of taking a blaster that works good and putting the cool stock on it. And that's back when master keys were like the ticket. That was like everybody was master keying everything. And so I thought, wow, that's really cool. And I came from the model car hobby where I was kind of accustomed to the kind of cutting and sticking things together kind of thing. And so this seemed like the natural progression, where it's like, hey, I've got something cool that I can customize and add things to and cut on and do all this and then paint it, but then I get to play with it. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. So I think I started with the Firefly part, and that was, I think, before I even really considered doing the rough cut part of things. But when this came together the first time, it was real basic. It was basically just like the back end cut off the Rapid Strike and Firefly stuck on there, and then the rough cut just kind of was stuck under there. And I remember sitting back and that's what really affected me as I was looking at it, and I thought, it's a cool idea, but there's got to be a better way to do it. So I got online and Googled Nerf Firefly Rapid Strike rough cut integration, and the only thing I came up with was the creation by Mag212, which I'll try to post a picture up while they're talking about this, and realized he came to apparently the same conclusion I did. And the Firefly's, it's a cool looking blaster. It's got real good lines and everything, but it's real tall. And what I ended up with was like a level up here, and then it stepped down to the rail here, and then it stepped down, and then it stepped down. And so I ended up with like the staircase on the top of the blaster, and the rough cut hung way down. And I just was looking at it and thought, man, the thing doesn't really have lines. It looks like exactly what it is. It looks like a blaster with a blaster with a blaster. And I had all the putty work done, and I was actually thinking about paint, and it just bugged the heck out of me. And I thought, there's got to be a better way. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to start over. So it was epoxy putty, so I was just able to bust all the pieces apart again. And which, man, that was a project in itself, just undoing all of the doing that I had done. Wow. And basically laid the pieces back out and said, okay, well, how can I make this look like it's supposed to be one blaster? And in hindsight, I could have done a better job, I think. But, this is literally my first Nerf integration project, and I learned so much doing this. So the idea I had was, I liked the thumb hole idea, but it stuck back too far, and it made it uncomfortable, because when I had everything in kind of its original version, then trying to actually hold it, the stock stuck way too far, but then to activate the rough cut was such a reach way out front that it was like trying to, run around the house with a school bus in your arms and trying to wield that. And I thought, that's got to change. I need to bring these in-a-ways. And so that's where things kind of get interesting. That's, in fact, I think we'll go ahead and pull this in-a-ways and really talk about what's going on. Now, this was the first of the minimized Firefly stocks, like what you saw on the Hellhound, which, yes, there's going to be a video on that soonish. So what we have, and we'll get these darts out of here, just so you can kind of see what's going on. There's a cut here, and a cut here, and a cut here, and there's a cut here. We'll start here. I wanted to pull the Firefly in-a-ways, and in order to make it still match up with the bottom of the grip, I had to cut some of the meat out of here and shorten that up. And as I recall, I just cut back here kind of where the, I think the natural seam is in the blaster shell detail, and basically just took the main part of this and just shoved it forward as far as I wanted. I believe, if I recall correctly, I don't have any pictures from back then because I didn't think anybody would ever care, and I didn't really know as I cared at the time either. But there's a straight line right here, which I assume you can see, where it's kind of discolored a little bit still. I had cut that straight off, right down through the grip when I did the integration the first time, because I had no clue what the heck I was doing, but I got to get the back of that Rapid Strike off there. So here there's a straight line, and I was able to recover these two pieces where the back of the kind of a cheek rest looking thing is. And I cut them off, moved the Firefly up as far as possible. So I recall this guy was way up here and it looked real goofy because it was like kind of hanging over the jam door, and I didn't like that because I wanted it all consolidated back to the stock. So I cut it all the way off, and you can see just some gross details in there, because let me in on your little secret here. This whole gap in here, that is foam backer rod jammed in there, covered in hot glue, and a couple prayers and a coat of paint. And yeah, this thing weighs a ton. And I remember at the time doing it thinking, there's got to be a better way of doing this. And yeah, it was a learning process. So that's why that looks as rough as it is. Anyway, and I also learned that when you take a circle and cut a section out of a circle, you end up with kind of an awkward space, which I learned to do a little differently on the Hellhound, because I cut at this line right here instead of cutting up here. But at the time, I didn't know what I was doing. So there's a good section missing out of here to bring the overall height down altogether. And that also brought the actual butt pad part down a ways, so it's a little closer to the grip. Instead of, if you notice with the Firefly, the stock is like up here and the grip is down here, so it's kind of an awkward grip. It's comfortable, but as far as like actually sighting down the blaster like you would sighting down a rifle or something like that, was a bit awkward. So I'll go into more detail in the Firefly minimization stock video thing, which will probably be in a couple weeks, we'll see. But I added these pieces back in, and the kind of the cheek rest area of the Rapid Strike angles, kind of tapers back a ways and kind of gets a little slimmer. So I ended up having to cut that and reshape it a little bit so I could get the detail, even though I didn't really maintain the original dimensions or shape or anything. But that basically helped bring the Rapid Strike details back into the Firefly, and otherwise it was just a straight line where it's like Rapid Strike, city limits, and now you have, Firefly. So what this did was basically soften the transition to where instead of being a blaster and a seam down the middle that you try to disguise or try to blend over, you're basically pulling the details of one into the other and getting a nice kind of an overlap. So that's how I did that guy there. And I realized I did a poor job down here, because it's just like, hey, details, and then it dies. Yeah, at the point I didn't know what I was doing. But the biggest problem with this is you'll notice there's a pretty definite line and a crack, because I was using epoxy putty and it probably wasn't good stuff to begin with. So you'll notice all the lines are all the seams are very obvious. Epoxy putty. I guess other people know how to work it. It never did the trick for me. But, so that's kind of how I treated the Firefly portion and got it pulled in to where it was comfortable and manageable, keeping in mind that I had the whole front half of the blaster and an aspect up front that I needed to be comfortable. So I think I brought the stock in just a little bit more than was super comfortable, because I needed, like, as far as just holding it conventionally, because usually when I hold a blaster, then I'll usually hold right in front of the magazine, which is this kind of cool little area here, which is actually surprisingly comfortable, but I still need to be able to reach forward and grab the grip. So I compensated for that by bringing the stock forward just a little bit more, which makes the thumb hole a bit smaller, but it's still comfortable, but it also brings the whole proportion overall together, which I'll go over later, I believe. Next up is the rough cut, which is a triggerless version, and the trigger and everything has been removed and all the voids filled, so it's all the way, basically there's no indication that there's ever a trigger there. So, which means it's a slam fire only. affair. Which, right about the time I was building this, is right when the 3D printing thing really kicked off. And one of the first products I saw was the, they call it auto trigger or something like that. That was the trigger piece that you put into the rough cut to make it slam fire all the time. I'm cheap, and you know I'm cheap. So instead of paying, I believe, $11 at the time for a piece that I could insert, I thought, well, I'll just build something out of junk. And so as I recall, there's a rod going through the original trigger piece that just kind of basically goes through the shells and just kind of holds it in place. I think we're going to open this up in a little bit, so we'll see how this goes. My object with the rough cut part of things was to pull it up as tight as possible, as far back and as far up, in order to basically make it as integrated, literally, as possible with the rest of the shell. Basically, I think I worked with the shells open when I was doing that, but I know I wanted to maintain this detail, and it was kind of a compromise in order to find kind of the happy medium. I wanted it as far north as possible, or as far up as possible, but I also wanted to make sure it pulled into the line, so instead of cutting it off straight like, you know, others you see, I tried to play off of this this little weird whatever the heck this is supposed to be on the Rapid Strike, and tried to kind of tie it in. And in hindsight, this line here is actually, I believe, the line from the stripe on the rough cut. In hindsight, I should have kept that height and followed this line here, which is part of that kind of gray gripish looking thing on the Rapid Strike. So I should have used that for a basically a character line to play off of, which is what I'm always looking for with integrations, as a way to make the two pieces kind of blend together. You know, what do I like about this that I can tie this into to make it all look nice? And so I ended up using that line because I was just at the time looking at, oh, that's a line. And then once it's painted, you realize, wow, that's kind of an awkward space there. And also, I probably should have done something about the rough cut logo up here. But I actually had to cut off the rail on the top of the rough cut, which you can kind of see right there. Pulling it any further. Whoa, hey, there we go. Yeah, ended up cutting off the rail on the rough cut down here a ways, and basically moved this up to the very bottom of the, I believe it's the orange portion of the rough cut. And the internals are so close together that when you prime the blaster, I ended up cutting off the little indicator tabs on the back of the rough cut priming rods. But even with those cut off as much as possible, when the rough cut is primed, I actually had to notch a little hole in the front of the flywheel cage because the priming rods came back too far. So literally when it's primed, the cage is, well, more than touching the priming rods, which was actually my goal. Not that entirely, but as far as to get the internals as close as possible so I can get these things pulled up as tight as possible. Next problem was, you know, that kind of, I brought this proportion in pretty good. The rails are fairly close, so I was eliminating that stair step, but there's still, the rough cut, or the Rapid Strike already has kind of a angle cut on the front of it, which basically gave me a stair step and a stair step and that thing. So I wanted to pull the blaster forward a ways without really adding a whole blaster or something to the front. And I had a busted Vulcan, and so I was able to pull the barrel, which I used the whole Vulcan muzzle piece to, there again, kind of bring the proportions together, because having a little tiny barrel was weird on such a kind of a gargantuan blaster like the Warlord. And so I used just the, whatever you want to call the kind of barrel shroud looking deals on the Vulcan, and was able to, this was when I got into the DevCon, which was so great, because it did a great job at blending these two pieces in that I couldn't have done with epoxy putty. But this is one of those I was like really proud of at the time, because these lines here come together really nice. This is the little notch on the front of the Rapid Strike where it kind of comes down at a bit of an angle. I was able to tie that into the kind of beveled area on the front of the Vulcan deal there. And also the lines of the stripe were able to carry on pretty well to where I was able to carry the line detail around. And I think in hindsight I'd do this a little bit differently, but it's one of those things where when I was taping it, it made sense. But there again, it kind of pulled this new piece of the blaster into, you know, is conceivable as a factory-ish, you know, it blended naturally, I thought. So the overall blaster itself is fairly well proportioned. I mean, the part of the problem with integrations is, especially like the Firefly stock thing, the Firefly is very tall and kind of narrow blaster. It's kind of like a flounder, I suppose. Those are those kind of flat and tall fish that end up laying down. I don't know, I'm not a marine biologist. But then you get the Rapid Strike is kind of a long, sleek, kind of like a barracuda, you know, and so you're adding like this big gawky thing on front of this little, like, or on the back of this real sleek looking piece. So it's easier to make the kind of floppy, weird looking guy smaller in proportion to the more sleek guy. And then able to carry these lines and make it a little longer and kind of helping to tie in, because like this part here isn't overly distracting. Like, as far as aesthetics, it's always cool when your secondary, like an underbarreled blaster, is tucked in a little bit behind the main barrel. But this here I'm happy enough with because it still kind of blends together and feels good. So that's kind of what we're looking at right there. Now this was back when coop wiring was like legal. Back when trust fires were a thing, and this actually operated on 3 trust fires for a while. In fact, I don't know where it's at actually. This is spliced together wiring disaster. So hey, for an adventure, let's open this thing up. It's been so long since I've had this thing apart. I'm actually just a little bit afraid to see what the insides look like, because a lot has happened since I built this, as far as technology. So, okay, so I don't know what we're gonna see, so please don't laugh. Okay. Oh yeah, okay. Right. Okay. Well, apparently I converted to LiPo at some point. That's dangerous. Okay, once upon a time, when this was rewired initially, well, I don't even. It's not even rewired. Oh boy, this is good stuff. Okay, once upon a time, when this was put together the first time, there's actually a 4AA holder, one of those kind of square boxy ones, that I tried to wire in so I could run my trust fires, because that was the answer back then. And yeah, when I was trying to solder the connections on, because I was too cheap to buy one of those little snap-on, because it had like one of those 9-volt deals on the top that you snap the little connector on. Well, I didn't want to buy one of those because they're like $3 more. So I tried to solder the connections right to the terminals on top, and one of them melted. So I can't remember how that worked, but it was real ugly and kind of scary. But, you know, I guess when you're dealing with trust fires in hindsight, then it was scary anyway. But it looks like I used junk wire to, oh yeah, hey, not a bad solder joint, but hey, that's duct tape, not even electrical tape. Wow, boy, how times have changed. And no insulation there, no insulation there. Boy, I was tapping into stock wiring. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, this is good stuff. Oh, I'm so ashamed of myself. Okay, well, I seem to have removed the mechanical locks wherever it was. There's one there and there somewhere. So apparently it removed the locks. Didn't even think to do anything with the switches. Oh boy. Yeah, boy, I'm like literally ashamed of myself at this point. So this thing needs overhauled because I've got 3 rhinos waiting because I was going to put them in here, but this thing needs a whole lot more work than just a motor swap. Oh boy, my landy. What's this thing? Oh, okay. Yeah, so here's one of the, is this the jam door lock, switch thing? Anyway, I apparently shoved it in that hole to keep it out of the way because I didn't know what to do with it. Wow. Oh, wow. Cringe. Anyway, here's the rough cut portion, and this is the metal pin that I at least drilled a hole for, and then I guess I epoxied it in. There's a lot more hot glue up here that I'm comfortable with. Huh. Wow. Anyway, there's this pin that holds the trigger kind of in the rearward position back here, and that's what lets you do the slam fire thing. Here's the little indicators cut off the back of the rough cut, which you can't see here, but if you can kind of see, where's my pointer stick? That'll point. You can kind of see in there where I had to knock out a bunch of the cage in order to make room for the back of the priming rod on the rough cut to fit. Because it would work, you know, I'd close it up and it wouldn't prime. And I'd look at it and hey, everything's cool, but this side would prime and it'd be fine, but that side wouldn't, and I couldn't figure it out. So, wow. And that's just PVC up here on the barrel. I never got around to touching that up and painting it. Well, I guess this was a bit of a rush job at the time. Huh. Wow. Sorry, I'm aghast at myself looking at this inside. Hoo-wee. Yeah, there's a lot more hot glue than I'm comfortable with. Wow. Anyway, so yeah, you can kind of see just how close the fit is here. You know, this is the roof of the battery compartment, essentially, not the tray itself, but the hole that it goes into. That's the. Okay, didn't have to cut the whole rail, just a bit of it. But I was able to pull this up as tight as I was. So you can kind of see how close the internals are. And everything back here is just empty. But I ended up cutting out the existing Firefly battery tray so I can at least shove the battery in here. Which, boy, I can't believe I apparently ran a LiPo on here once. This must have been right after I converted to LiPo, because, wow, I don't have words right now for how I feel about my former self. But anyway, so yeah, I probably could have done something better back here. And good grief, I can't. Wow. This on top of the fact that I was running Trust Fires and stock motors, which at the time, back when this was built initially, there was, RM2s were the in thing. That was like the peak of motor technology. Was Trust Fires or RM2, the Solar Robotics or whatever. That wow. This gives you an idea of how far the electrical side of things, of the technology of the community, has evolved in just less than 3 years. So that's actually really nice that technology has moved on, because this actually horrifies me. So that's how that is. And I believe, okay, yeah, I kept the switch button here, figuring that maybe someday I could do something cool with it. That day hasn't come yet, but who knows? There's a lot to be fixed here. So let's button this thing back up and have another look, because this thing's going to give me nightmares. Okay. So that's kind of what that's how things started for me. So you guys, I've seen a lot of posts on Reddit, posts on Facebook, people saying, hey, I want to do integrating stuff, but I'm afraid to start because I'll screw things up. Boy, this thing's kind of screwed up as it is. So don't feel too bad, guys. That's the important part is learning. I learned so much on just the first version I put together of this to what it is now was such a jump in that whole learning curve, and just knowing how pieces go together, and just kind of developing a feel for how the plastic goes together, and just moving on from this onto other projects. Learned so much. I think in hindsight I probably would have started smaller, which I recommend to other people just starting into integrating, not knowing what your background is. But yeah, start cutting stuff up, because you can't screw it up too bad. But yeah, this is the Warlord. I've kind of kicked around the idea in the past because I need to go through and rewire this, obviously. I was going to add motors to it. Part of me wants to go back and correct some of the sins of the past and make it a little better, but part of me wants to start over entirely because there's a few things I'd like to proportion the back just a little bit more because the back's kind of heavy just a little bit compared to the rest of the blaster. This here I'm okay with, but one note with the rough cut is some of the lines don't really jive. I think part of having this, leaving this seam here and where it meets up with these guys originally was cool, but it's kind of a bit awkward because you have like this angle and then it turns into this other angle that really doesn't play off of anything else. You have kind of this line and this line where it comes up here. I think in hindsight, I think if I was to do it again, for one thing I would come up into here a little more, but I think I'd play this a little different. I might even take this line here and where it comes up just a little bit, I think I'd bring the rough cut down just a hair so you can have this line come across here straight, and then work into blending this, you know, either adding some material or something here that kind of mimics this shape and bring it all the way here. That way it looks like, you know, he'd come across here then kick down. It would make it look a lot more integrated, obviously literally, but or even scratch building something, eliminating this bulge entirely since it comes out really for no reason, since that's where the battery compartment was. Cutting it out and adding something else a little more flush, cutting a piece of shell off another blaster, or even you could get away with cutting this off and then just trimming the ends, you know, the depth off and blending it back in. That way you'd have the same, obviously the same rough shape, but you'd end up giving it kind of a lower profile. Yeah, I think that'd help blend it in a little bit more as well. Also had aspirations, of course, with the Rewire motor edition, doing something a little more practical than the Slamfire rough cut. I'd considered doing 2 air tanks, and I think I did some research before. XPZ tanks are too big without some shell cutting, but Panther tanks apparently fit, but Panther tanks are also really hard to find. Because I thought, hey, I have all this room back here, I could put a compressor, a couple of tanks, and that was going to be cool. So there's a lot of changes I'd like to do to this platform because it's relative. I mean, I like the way it looks roughly. There's a lot of things that I'd want to change, like I said, but I don't know. Should I modify this one or should I build another one from scratch with the added knowledge that I have now and try to make a better overall version, or should I just leave it alone and move on and work on entirely new ideas? You tell me. So thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. This is Mr. Nathan, wishing you, as always, blue skies and green lights to you and yours, and may all your troubles be teeny weeny ones.